She was the quietest voice in the room until the day she stood up and changed everything. What happens when grace dares to confront power? If you've ever wondered how one act of courage can awaken a nation, this story is for you. Press play to dive in. She sat alone in a quiet room, watching the world try to tear down everything she loved. And then, she stood up. What does it look like when the softest voice in the room is the one that makes all the difference? In a world where power tends to yell and truth is overwhelmed, can grace prevail? And when the storms roll in, who will stand, not for politics, but for people? This is the tale of a woman who didn't go looking for the spotlight, but found herself in it when silence was no longer available. In a dramatic live interview, U.S. Senator Elizabeth Warren surprised everyone by labeling President Donald Trump a national disgrace. But nobody expected that First Lady Melania Trump would react, and with such venom that she totally left Warren speechless. The studio was thick with tension. Cameras were rolling, and the Americans watched by millions as Senator Warren sat secure opposite the host of Morning America Live. She leaned forward, a tiny smile twisting on her lips. President Trump, she asserted in a biting tone, is nothing short of a national embarrassment. He's wielding the presidency to ram his big, beautiful bill, a preposterous piece of legislation based on personal agendas. He's closing down America for the sole purpose of indulging his own ego, not to serve the people. Gasps spread through the studio audience. Tweets flooded Twitter in a matter of seconds. National disgrace became a trending phrase as Warren's words resounded in living rooms across the nation. Senator Warren was unaware that Melania Trump was listening from her personal office. She sat alone, her hands shaking, not with fear, but with a silent, steely anger. Melania scrunched up her eyes. This wasn't the first time this person had attempted to put down her husband, but today, something within her snapped. She has no idea what she's done, Melania murmured to herself. Whereas Warren continued taunting the president's policies and even questioning his sanity, Melania stood up. She took her phone and dialed a number. "Put me on air," she said with a calm but frigid voice. The producers of Morning America Live gazed at one another, agog. "Melania Trump, she wishes to speak," stammered one of them. "Yes," replied an assistant, her eyes wide with fear. "She says it's urgent and she's not taking no for an answer." Within minutes, the call was patched through to the show. "Senator Warren," the host interrupted softly. "Before we go, there's someone calling in who'd like to react to what you said." Warren's smile faltered. She set her chin. "Oh? And who is that?" "This is Melania Trump." A smooth, calm voice came through the loudspeakers. The studio fell silent. Warren's face spasmed as she leaned back, attempting to seem relaxed. "Mrs. Trump," Warren declared with mocking incredulity, "are you calling to defend your husband's circus bill?" But Melania did not blink. "No, Senator Warren," she replied quietly. "I am calling to call you out." The mouth of the host dropped open. The audience gasped, and even Warren's smug grin vanished. "You've talked a lot about disgrace today," Melania continued, her voice cool but edged with something sharp. "But do you know what a real disgrace is?" Warren folded her arms, her knuckles going white. "Go ahead," she challenged. "Enlighten me." "A real disgrace," Melania said evenly, "is someone using her position to destroy America. A real disgrace is sponsoring illegal operations, exploiting vulnerable people, and pretending to care about this country while pocketing millions from secret deals." The audience erupted in shocked chatter. Warren's face turned pale. "You're lying!" Warren shouted. "I don't lie, Senator," Melania replied coldly. "I have the proof." The producers, knowing this was history in the making, let the cameras roll. Around the country, Citizens watched in silence as Melania's measured words started to expose years of Warren's secret doings. "You're upset with my husband," she continued, "because his beautiful big bill shuts down your illegal enterprises. You're losing power because we're sending out the criminals you invited in. You're scared, Senator, and America should know why." By this time, Warren's hands were shaking. She attempted to speak, but nothing came out. In living rooms throughout the nation, individuals watched, some mouths agape, others wiping away tears, as Melania's voice cut through all the din. The silence was so profound it was as if the entire nation was holding its breath. Elizabeth Warren, so confident a moment before, sat rigidly. Her hands were folded so tightly her knuckles were white. "Mrs. Trump," she finally stuttered, attempting a wobbly laugh, "you're clinging to straws to defend your husband's reckless bill. You ought to stay out of politics and be First Lady instead." But Melania didn't even sound loud. Her tone was as cold as ice. "You're scared of me because I know the truth," Melania explained quietly. "The truth about your hidden businesses, about how you've leveraged your office to back up phony charities that route money out of illegal activities. You speak of shielding Americans, but you're the one who brought criminals into this nation." The host's jaw went slack. In the studio, there was a growing murmur of shock. "Liar!" Warren yelled, her voice shattering under the weight. "You can't substantiate any of this." Melania stood still for a moment. Then she uttered 5 soft words that sent shivers down the spine of the nation. "I already sent the proof." It took just a moment, and breaking news notifications blazed across all the major networks. Melania Trump publishes explosive documents on Warren. Photos, bank statements, and emails, all of the proof Melania had secretly given reporters, now dominated every television screen. Senator Warren funneled campaign contributions into secret offshore accounts, Melania went on, her voice unfaltering. She compensated smugglers to bring in workers to do jobs in her hidden businesses, businesses that steal Americans' jobs and dignity. The host attempted to wrestle the discussion back under control. "Senator Warren, do you deny these allegations?" he demanded, his tone tight with incredulity. Warren's face was bright red. She stuttered, trying to frame a sentence. This is a setup," she stammered. "It's fake!" But the audience no longer seemed to believe her. Neither did the millions at home. Melania's tone softened then, as if she were scolding a child. "You referenced my husband as a disgrace," she stated firmly. "Yet you are the one disgracing America. You and Biden ruined this nation, and now you're shaking in your boots because we are making it right." Water welled up in the eyes of viewers from coast to coast. Elizabeth Warren stood up from her seat, shaking with rage. "This is not over," she yelled. "You and your husband will regret this moment." But Melania didn't waver. "Senator Warren," she said calmly, "you've already lost. The good people of America can see you now." Warren walked off the set, and the live audience suddenly resorted to a chant. "USA! USA! USA!" The camera swung over to the host, who was totally flabbergasted. "Ladies and gentlemen," he whispered almost to himself, "we did not expect this today. The First Lady has just shared shocking allegations against Senator Warren, and we'll be following this story closely." Melania took a long, steady breath. Even though her face was calm, she was holding back a storm of emotion inside. She hadn't done this for politics. She had done it for America. At home, individuals rubbed their eyes. For the first time in years, many viewed Melania not as a reserved person in the shadows, but as a fierce defender of the truth. And far away, within Warren's campaign headquarters, her staff was in chaos. Phones rang constantly. Staff shouted over one another, attempting to decide what to do. The nation was abuzz. Phones glowed in living rooms, office break rooms, and coffee houses. Cable news stations aired the clip over and over. Melania Trump reveals Warren's corruption. In the studio, meanwhile, the host struggled to maintain command of the runaway interview. "Senator Warren," he badgered, "this proof, these emails, these payments, what do you have to say?" Warren's voice trembled. This is a smear campaign," she stuttered. "It's just a distraction from Trump's bill that's hurting people." But Melania's serene voice sliced through like a knife. "Hurting people? No, Senator. My husband's big, beautiful bill is saving America. It stops the chaos you and Biden caused. It restores jobs to real Americans, and it keeps our children safe from the criminals you brought in." Warren banged her hand on the table. "You're lying!" she screamed. But her anger wasn't doing her any good. On televisions everywhere, people could witness the contrast. Melania was composed and confident, while Warren was losing it. Melania continued to talk, her tone gentler than before. "I'm not a politician, Senator. I'm simply a mother who wants America secure for every family. But you traded America for power." And for the first time, tears glistened in Warren's eyes. In her campaign office, meanwhile, her aides were texting her in a frenzy. "End the interview. Leave now." But they were too late. "Senator," the host said tactfully, "the First Lady has made serious allegations. Can you deny them on oath?" Warren's lip quivered. "This is political theater," she burst out. "None of this is true. She's not even in government. Why should we listen to her?" Melania's response was cool, but it had a gentle strength. "Because the American people can sense the truth," she said quietly. "And because I have one more thing." The host leaned forward. "Continue," he said. "Senator Warren," Melania went on, her voice firm, "you diverted millions through an imaginary charity to fund illicit activities that harmed women and children. Shall I recite the names of the victims?" Warren's face disintegrated. "Stop," she breathed. "Don't do this on television." But Melania didn't stop. Each time she read a name, at-home viewers cried. Mothers, fathers, and children, real individuals whose lives were ruined by the havoc Warren and her supporters caused. Throughout America, individuals started viewing Melania as more than merely the First Lady. A hero. The air in the studio was so charged it was like trying to breathe through a thick blanket. The host coughed, attempting to keep his voice level. "Senator Warren," he asked softly, "would you like to respond?" Warren could not. She jumped up so fast her chair fell behind her onto the floor. "This is libel," she bellowed. "Melania Trump is simply a puppet reading lines from her husband." Melania's voice didn't waver. "No, Senator," she replied calmly. "I'm speaking from the heart. You're the puppet. For corruption." Warren stalked off the set. Boos resounded through the audience as she made her way behind the stage curtain. Melania's last words trailed out the door. "The American people deserve better," she declared, her voice echoing through the studio. "They deserve leaders who care. And we will rebuild this country, with or without your help." In the home of viewers, tears were flowing. Scads held their chests tight as they witnessed Melania standing tall, not as a politician, but as a symbol of strength and truth. The studio lights flickered momentarily, and the camera remained fixed on Melania's face, now projected onto a giant screen behind the host. Her voice softened, and for the very first time it cracked with emotion. "You see," she started, "I never wanted to talk like this in public. But enough is enough. My husband has been called a lot of names. I have been called a lot of names too. But we are strong because we love America." She took a pause, her eyes welling up with unshed tears. "But Senator Warren, you do not love this country. You love power. You love money. You used innocent people, mothers, fathers, even children, to build your secret empire. In the crowd, a woman wiped away her tears. Another covered her hand over her heart and mouthed, "She's telling the truth." Melania's next sentence shattered the hearts of millions sitting in their living rooms. "Senator Warren, how many families have you ruined? How many lives have you destroyed by pretending to care? The time for lies is over." The host struggled to find his voice. Around the country, folks were weeping, not with rage, but because they sympathized with Melania and her strength. Twitter and Facebook blew up. Melania, the lioness, started trending globally as videos of her tranquil but fierce dismantling went viral. "She's a hero," one woman wrote, sharing a photo of Melania's tear-stained face. Back in Warren's campaign headquarters, pandemonium reigned. Her staff were yelling at one another. "Shut her down," one shouted. "Get the media on our side," another snapped. "Call in favors now!" But it was too late. Reporters, sensing blood, had begun to dig deeper into whatever Melania had uncovered. Hour by hour, more incriminating documents surfaced online. In the studio, the host addressed the live feed again. "Mrs. Trump," he asked softly, "is there something else you'd like to say to Senator Warren?" "Yes," Melania responded softly. She unfolded a small, crumpled piece of paper. "This is a letter from a woman named Carla," she said shakily. "Her son was murdered by an illegal alien your policies shielded, Senator Warren. She requested I read it today." Melania took a shaky breath and began to read Carla's heartbreaking letter. In the audience, people sobbed openly. Even the host wiped tears from his eyes. And just as the show was about to end, another voice joined the call, a voice that boomed through the studio speakers. "This is President Donald J. Trump." The host nearly fell out of his chair. "Mr. President, you're live," the host said, voice a little unsteady. "Thank you," Trump responded. "I wasn't going to be speaking today, but after listening to my wonderful wife defend this nation, I couldn't remain silent." He went on, his voice stern and adamant. "Elizabeth Warren is attempting to dismantle all that we have worked so diligently to repair. She speaks of me as a disgrace, but it is her own shameful corruption that has been revealed. We are tidying up after her and Biden left, and we will not rest until America is once more safe and secure." Melania's voice reappeared, gentle but firm. "To every American who's watching," she said, "this is not about politics. This is about defending our home." At that time, all over the nation, individuals rose from their seats. Tears were streaming down many faces. It was no longer just a political fight. It was personal. Melania had spoken for the people. In Warren's campaign headquarters, pandemonium reigned. Phones were ringing non-stop as donors withdraw support, and longtime supporters started to distance themselves. "Senator," a staff member whispered urgently, "we're losing support. If you don't deal with this now, it's done." But Warren couldn't piece together her thoughts. Melania's soothing words lingered in her head. "You sold America for power." Meanwhile, Melania held up. She went back to the White House, her phone ringing constantly with messages of appreciation and encouragement. "Melania," Trump said gently as she entered the Oval Office, "you were amazing today. You hung tougher than I ever could." Melania smiled weakly with an air of exhaustion. "I didn't do it for politics," she said. "I did it for the mothers and fathers who should have peace in this country." News channels broadcast wall-to-wall coverage of Melania's bombshell. When she had tearfully read Carla's letter, the moment went viral, replayed over and over. From coast to coast in America, people congregated in living rooms, community centers, and churches. Many cried openly. "She's not the First Lady," one woman said in tears to CNN. "She's the mother of this country." The following morning, Warren appeared on a competing network, struggling hard to restore her reputation. "This is all false news," she argued, her voice breaking. The Trumps are deceiving you in order to distract you from their defeats. But it did not convince anyone. At the very same time, Melania delivered another press conference, this time on the White House lawn. I never wished to enter into this battle, she started gently. But when a person lies about my husband and attempts to ruin the nation that we love, I will not remain silent. Next, she waved signed affidavits, testimony by whistleblowers and former Warren aides, attesting to her illicit activities. Senator Warren profited off the job while good Americans suffered, Melania went on. My husband's legislation isn't for him. It's for all families attempting to rebuild after years of turmoil. The crowd erupted into applause. Tears streamed down faces as Melania raised her hand slightly in recognition. This nation deserves leaders who care, she stated, and we will continue to fight to restore what was lost. As her statement rang out throughout the country, something unexpected occurred. In cities large and small, citizens lit candles and came together to pray for her and the president. On social media, the hashtag Thank You Melania became trending worldwide. Elizabeth Warren was nowhere to be found. She had reporters swarming her front porch, clamoring for answers, yet she remained silent. And that silence said more than anything she could have uttered. In the White House, Trump embraced Melania and held her close. You didn't just defend me, he whispered. You healed a broken country. Melania gazed out the window at the throngs clustering on the lawn, waving American flags and singing in unison. I simply reminded them of what they already knew, she said quietly. Outside, the choruses became louder. USA! 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 Most of the individuals in that crowd had tears of joy glistening in their eyes. And at that point, the country grasped something deeply. Melania Trump wasn't standing up for her husband alone. She was standing up for all of them. In her office, alone, Elizabeth Warren stared blankly at the news feeds. Every channel played Melania Trump's press conference on repeat. Senator Warren's suspected bribery under scrutiny, the headlines screamed. Her phone rang again and again, but she couldn't even make herself pick it up. Calls were flooding in, angry donors, frantic aides, even family members demanding an explanation. At the same time in the White House, Melania sat in silence with President Trump and Barron, her hands neatly folded in her lap. You were perfect, Trump whispered. You've done more than I ever dreamt. Melania shook her head. This was never about me, Donald, she said. It's about America. It's about making the truth louder than the lies. At that very moment, breaking news flashed across the networks. Federal agents had opened a preliminary investigation into Warren's offshore accounts and her charities. All across America, people stood in front of their TVs, their hearts heavy. A farmer in Iowa turned to his wife and whispered, I never thought I'd cry over a first lady. But she's fighting for us. Later that evening, Melania spoke to the country in a televised address. She stood in the East Room, her voice steady but with emotion. I came to America for freedom, she started, her accent muted but forceful. And I love this country with all my heart. Her voice welled up with tears as she continued. Today I spoke out because I've seen how corruption and lies ruin good people's lives. I've seen children cry over parents lost to drugs and violence brought here under bad policies. Enough is enough. Melania hesitated and put her hand over her heart. My husband's bill is not ideal, she went on, but it's about defending American families. Senator Warren refers to it as a disgrace because it inhibits her illegal operations. But the actual disgrace is abusing power to hurt the very people you promised to help. In living rooms, coffee shops, and hospitals nationwide, people wept openly. Internet viewers shared, I'm unable to hold back my tears. Melania is talking for all of us. As her speech concluded, Cheers erupted outside White House gates, where protesters held candles and waved flags. Elizabeth Warren attempted to appear tough at a hastily convened press conference. But when reporters fired questions regarding the leaked evidence, her self-control failed. "Senator," a reporter shouted, "why did whistleblowers say you made money out of illegal immigration?" Warren's voice cracked. "These are lies. Lies propagated by the Trumps to divert your attention from their failures," she stated firmly. But no one appeared to credit her anymore. Even her most ardent supporters were silently distancing themselves. In the White House, Melania viewed the press conference on television. "Do you pity her?" Trump inquired softly. Melania paused. "No," she said at last. "I pity the people she betrayed." As Warren fumbled off the stage, Melania mouthed to herself, "America deserves better." And throughout the nation, Americans nodded through their tears. For the first time in years, they felt a spark of hope. Outside the White House, the streets were lined with candles, flags, and hand-scrawled signs that said, "We stand with Melania." People cried openly as they replayed her beautiful words from the previous night. In small towns and large cities, families huddled around their televisions. Veterans saluted the screen. Mothers hugged their children close, whispering, "This is why we fight for America." In her own private rooms, Melania sat in silence, witnessing the live footage. Her hands shook a little as she watched the outpouring of love from Americans of all walks of life. "She's healing the country," a Fox News host intoned, her voice breaking, not with anger or resentment, but with something approaching awe. Then, in an instant, there was a breaking news alert on every major network. Elizabeth Warren's former aide testifies. She knew everything. Warren's world was crumbling before America's eyes, and she was watching every moment. Elizabeth Warren paced urgently in her closed office. She had known this was a possibility. The witness statement of her former assistant had been heart-wrenching. "She utilized illicit funds to sustain her political apparatus," the aide confessed, sobbing. "I cannot live with the shame anymore." Warren pounded her fist on the desk. "They are setting me up! This is all Melania's work," she exclaimed. But nobody was listening anymore. Her staff started to quit, each one of them, one by one. Her telephone rang constantly, but even her best supporters wouldn't pick it up. And then Melania showed up on an unexpected live broadcast. Out in the Rose Garden, she spoke gently but firmly into the camera. "Senator Warren wanted America to think my husband was the shame," she said. "But the truth has come out, and the truth hurts." She stopped, and she wept, tears streaming down her face. "I weep not for myself, but for all innocent Americans victimized by her self-absorption. For all mothers who lost their children due to policies forged in backroom deals. And for all fathers who could not feed their families because their livelihoods were taken away." The whole country wept alongside with her, and as Melania's words traveled to every part of America, something amazing started to occur. Church bells tolled in small towns. In town squares all over the nation, people gathered, standing together and praying aloud for Melania's courage. Even those who had been critical of her for years said she was the most elegant First Lady ever. Elizabeth Warren, however, was nowhere to be found. It was rumored that she was holed up in her Boston house, too embarrassed to come out. At the White House, President Trump embraced Melania tightly. "You've done more than I ever could," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "You gave people hope again." Melania shook her head demurely. "I didn't do this for politics, Donald," she told him. "America is my home now, and I will defend it with my voice." On the White House lawn that night, there were thousands of candles left by ordinary Americans. A mother cradled her baby and whispered through her tears, "She's not the First Lady. She's the mother of this country." And with that, Melania Trump's position in the hearts of millions was cemented forever. The following morning, Americans awakened to another stunning headline. Federal agents had stormed Warren's Boston mansion. Helicopters hovered above as agents hauled box after box of evidence out the front entrance. News cameras focused on Warren, sitting in the back seat of a tinted window car, her face drained of color as she was whisked away. In the White House, Melania sat by the window, observing the live broadcast. She murmured quietly to herself, "Truth always finds the light." Outside Warren's residence, the reporters hollered questions. "Senator Warren, do you deny the accusations? Did you take advantage of migrant workers for money?" But Warren did not raise her head. Inside the vehicle, her hands shook. "This is Melania's fault," she bit her lips. "That foreign woman ruined me." Meanwhile, social media lit up with praise for Melania. "She didn't just expose corruption. She gave America back its hope," one post read. At a diner in Ohio, an elderly veteran wiped his eyes and whispered to the waitress, "We've never had a first lady like her. Never." That evening, Melania addressed the nation again. She stood calmly at a podium on the White House lawn, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "I arrived in America as an immigrant looking for freedom," she started, her accent gentle but firm. "And this nation provided me with everything. Now it's my turn to contribute." She stared directly at the camera, eyes shining with tears. "This is not about politics," she stated. "It's about guarding the hopes of mothers and fathers, children and grandparents. America is mighty, but we are only as mighty as the truth we uphold." Crowds outside the White House erupted in applause. Families all across America huddled around their TVs. Many wept as Melania's words poured over them like healing rain. "She's not doing it for Trump only," a young mother whispered, embracing her child. "She's doing it for all of us." Elizabeth Warren's world came crashing down. Old friends now branded her as toxic. Party leaders would not take her calls. Television news filmed her entering a courthouse, her head low. A protester shouted, "Melania was right about you." While that was happening, Melania remained gracious and unobtrusive. She did not gloat or trumpet. Instead, she spent the day in a children's hospital in Washington, D.C., cuddling babies and reassuring worried parents. "She's pure light," one nurse whispered, her eyes brimming over with tears. Later that evening, when videos of Warren's arrest were being played on all channels, Americans did not applaud. They wept. Not over Warren's collapse, but because Melania's serene strength had shown them what dignity is. In a Kansas living room, a grandmother faced her grandchildren and whispered, "Melania Trump is the first lady we never knew we needed. She's rescuing this nation in her own fashion." Elizabeth Warren was by herself in a chilly interrogation room, gazing at her own image reflected in the one-way mirror. Her authority was lost. Her voice, once so strong and assured, had been reduced to no more than a shattered whisper. They trusted her," Warren spoke with bitter frustration. "Melania Trump ruined everything." While in the White House, Melania sat quietly at the resolute desk, a pen sitting in her hand. Reporters were already assembled outside, anticipating her next words. "Ready?" President Trump asked quietly, putting his hand on her shoulder. Melania nodded. "It's not about revenge," she said. "It's about bringing hope back to America." She walked up to the podium for a live, nationally broadcast address. The room went utterly silent. Millions of Americans listened from the living rooms, offices, and hospital beds of the nation. "Tonight," Melania started softly, her voice calm and with emotion, "I speak not as First Lady, but as a mother and as a daughter of America." Her voice wavered slightly, but her eyes remained firm. "My husband's bill is not for himself," she declared. It's for every family who has already lost too much because of the corruption we uncovered." Viewers everywhere held tissues, their eyes brimming with tears. Melania stopped as her voice trembled, passion welling up in her tone. "Senator Warren ridiculed my husband and labeled him a disgrace," she went on. "But what about the shame of mothers losing their kids to addiction and violence? What about the shame of Americans losing their livelihoods due to illegal scams? That is the true tragedy." She displayed a photo of Carla, the mother whose letter she read earlier. "This is Carla," she whispered. "She lost her son due to policies that place criminals ahead of citizens. How many more Carlas do we need before we finally cry, 'Enough'?" Outside the White House, the live crowd started to chant, their voices rising as one. "Enough! Enough! Enough!" Men and women cried openly inside homes all over America. One young father looked at his son's wife and whispered to his wife, "She's speaking for us. She's fighting for our children." Melania drew in a breath. She said, "This is not about politics. This is about bringing back dignity, love, and security to the land we call home." Millions had converged in public spaces and front yards by the time she finished speaking, with candles and light held high into the darkness. From Texas to New York, throngs of sobbing Americans prayed out loud and sang patriotic hymns. Elizabeth Warren sat in her holding cell, her face ashy and her eyes empty. "She won," she breathed faintly. But Melania Trump hadn't merely won an argument. She had won America's heart. In the Oval Office, Trump hugged her. "They love you," he said, tears sparkling in his eyes. "You did what no one else could." Melania backed away, her voice gentle but firm. "I didn't do this to be loved," she said. "I did it because America is worth it." Outside, the chanting grew louder, more passionate. "Thank you, Melania. Thank you, Melania." America had spoken. Elizabeth Warren stood before flashing cameras outside the courthouse. Her once strong voice was now a weak whisper. I erred," she stuttered, "but I did not deserve this humiliation." Reporters bombarded her with questions regarding the offshore accounts, whistleblower testimonies, and illegal businesses she had continuously denied for years. Warren's tears, however, elicited no sympathy, only silence. At the same moment, Melania sat with President Trump in the White House Rose Garden. Her hands were clasped tightly, her eyes full of emotion. "Donald," she whispered, "this was never about destroying her. It was about healing America." Trump nodded, his voice softer than usual. "And you've done that," he said. "You've given people hope again." Outside, thousands held candles in a quiet vigil. Their voices rose in song. A small child held a tiny American flag and told her mother in a whispered voice, "Mommy, I want to grow up to be like Melania." Later that evening, Melania took to the airwaves one final time during this chapter of her battle. The country breathed in unison. She faced the cameras with no speech in hand, her voice calm but intimate. "America is not perfect," she started, "but it is worth fighting for. Not with hate, not with division, but with love and truth." She took a breath and placed her hands over her heart, her fingers shaking a little. "I am not a politician," she went on. "I am a mother, a wife, and a first lady who cares deeply about this nation. My husband's bill wasn't about power. It was about restoring dignity to families." Tears were shed freely as people observed. "To all the Americans who are watching," Melania declared, her voice firm but soft, "never forget this. You are stronger than the lies they tell you. You are braver than the fear they spread. Together, we will rebuild this beautiful land, one heart at a time." Throughout the nation, there were candles held aloft. Some prayed in hushed tones, others just wept. At dawn on Washington, the world was a different place. The scandals were behind them. Warren's corruption was no longer the headline. Now they were praising a woman who had reached the hearts of millions. In the Oval Office, Trump hugged Melania tightly. "You didn't just save my reputation," he whispered, his voice trembling with emotion. "You saved America's soul." Melania smiled weakly. "It wasn't me, Donald," she said quietly. "It was the truth." Throughout America, citizens came together to rejoice at a new start. Flags fluttered triumphantly, church bells tolled, families held one another closer. On his porch, an old war vet stood with his hand on his heart as tears streamed down his face. "God bless Melania Trump," he breathed. "She showed us what America is all about."